When Twilight finally woke up, she felt strangely rejuvenated. She tried to move, and fear flared up inside of her mind. She was sitting inside of a chair, heavy chains binding her hooves together so that she couldn't move around at all that much. Did Cheerilee catch her again? As she looked around, however, she realized that was not the case. She was in a very large room, and a great deal of ponies sat on other benches beside her, while Princess Luna herself sat on a raised platform right in front of Twilight. Two muscular, armor-clad guards flanked her on either side, and an earth pony in a monocle and a brown coat paced back and forth restlessly in front of her. A table stood next to him, but Twilight couldn't make out the items that lay on top of it. It was Luna who first noticed the unicorn had woken up. "Ah, we see that thou hast awoken, Twilight Sparkle. Court is now in session," Luna decreed with a booming voice, which easily reached every corner of the room, and the few ponies who had been talking to each other immediately fell silent. Twilight stared at the princess in bewilderment. Court? The ruler of the night frowned. "Surely thou dost not claim loss of memory. We are here to pass judge thee for the brutal murder of 14 ponies, 8 of whom hath not reached adulthood yet." "Wait, what?" Twilight said, utterly horrified. "I killed Cheerilee, true. Do we really have to do this? She even confessed," the brown-coated earth pony said. But I had nothing to do with the others. They were killed by Cheerilee." The crowd behind Twilight mumbled, and the earth pony in front of Twilight addressed the princess. "If I may." "By all means, Sir Hooves," the princess said with a nod. Ahem. Hooves scraped his throat. "I am sure you are familiar with my work, Miss Sparkle." Twilight nodded, dumbfounded. She had several of his books back at the library. She had just never thought she'd meet him in person. "Yes, we already knew that," he continued. "This also means that you're well aware of my expertise. I was summoned here today to present the evidence my research team managed to scrounge up. As you will see, strongly suggests you are guilty. You've erased your trail well, and no event can be directly tied to you. But when they're all added together..." "That's absurd!" Twilight yelled. "Where's Princess Celestia? She would never..." "Our royal sister is currently resting in her chambers, Twilight Sparkle. The procedure to save thee took a lot out of her." Twilight nodded slowly, as she recalled the conversation she had overheard when she was out of it. "Don't I get any pony to defend me?" she asked. "Only if some pony like that can be found in due time," Hooves said dryly. "In your case, due to the horrendous nature of your crimes and the depth of evidence against you, no such pony could be found. As the law does not require us to look further, you shall have to defend yourself. From what I've heard, you should be more than capable." Twilight bit her lower lip. She knew almost no pony ever went to court in Equestria. It just wasn't needed that often. And 3 times a royal court had been assembled during her lifetime. The accused had been found guilty. She swallowed. Show me this proof, then." "Very well," Hooves replied. "I shall start with the Ponyville Theater fire." Twilight nodded. She was quite sure she had done nothing suspicious there. "We have quite a high number of ponies who swore, under oath, that you were amongst the first. Considering your later involvement in the slaughter of the only survivors of the event, I find that highly suspicious." "I wasn't alone," Twilight said defensively. "Several of my friends were there too." Hooves nodded. "Yet no pony dared say whether they had arrived with you or not. And now, luck would have it that all 5 of them are dead. So you can't even ask them ourselves." Twilight sputtered. But that's... How do you expect me to prove..." "I don't," he said, as he turned towards the crowd, addressing them more than he did the unicorn. "But here's my theory. You lit the fire, and the 5 of them were together when the fire started, or close by. Perhaps they had noticed something odd about you before. Perhaps it was just by chance. But they arrived at the scene sooner than you had expected, which in turn forced your hoof, forcing you to save Cheerilee or risk being discovered. The ponies behind Twilight started talking to each other again, muttering their agreement. To them, it all made sense. "That's a lie!" Twilight yelled indignantly. "Oh, is it? Then, why did you level the entire theater building immediately afterwards, after your friends had run to investigate? Perhaps you feared they'd find something they weren't supposed to find," he said as he paced back and forth in front of Twilight. "Or maybe you just knew how difficult that'd make our investigation. Either way, I just wanted to save the fillies!" Sherlock Hooves frowned and took out his monocle, quickly polishing it with a piece of cloth before putting it on again. "Yes, you, tried to save them by sending a theater smashing amount of water in their direction, 100% guaranteed to destroy whatever was left of the building. Maybe you were known as an idiot, Miss Sparkle. If you were, but Princess Celestia's student? No pony here is buying it." Sounds of agreement came floating from the other ponies, and Twilight gritted her teeth. "I panicked," she said in frustration. "Sure you did," Hooves said sarcastically. Twilight felt her blood boil at the way she was being treated, seemingly branded a criminal already. "Yes, I did, you bucking oaf!" The crowd collectively gasped, and Luna leaned forward. "Twilight Sparkle, if thou canst not adhere to a minimum level of decorum, thou shalt be removed from this courtroom, and we shall finish this case without thee," Luna reprimanded Twilight, who immediately regretted her choice of words. "Thank you, Princess," Hoof said as he continued. "Now, Twilight, you are aware of our fruitless efforts to find any sort of evidence in the debris you created, are you not?" "Yes," Twilight said reluctantly, trying to at least appear cooperative. "Then why, may I ask, did we find a bloody piece of the theater floor in your bedroom, which you have omitted to mention?" The crowd buzzed angrily once more, and Twilight actually heard a mare say, "Outrageous!" somewhere close behind her. "Oh, no, it's not what you think," Twilight said lightheartedly. "At least, that one was easy to clear up. Twist found that and gave it to me. She wanted me to check to see if it was actually blood, and such, before kicking up a fuss about it." "And who can confirm this?" Twist. And Spike, my assistant," Twilight said, trying to think of any others she may have said anything to. "Both of whom are dead," Hoof said, in a how convenient tone of voice. Yes," Twilight was forced to admit as she hung her head. This wasn't going too well. "I believe you when you say a Twist was onto something," Hoof said, making Twilight lift her head. Again, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "That's probably why you decided to kill her, after all." "What? No!" Twilight said, once again outraged. "Cheerilee abducted her to the fortress, out in the woods. I want to save her." "No pony canst enter our fortresses anymore, Twilight Sparkle," Luna interjected. "Our sister destroyed all of the access crystals over a millennia ago. When we heard thou hast made use of the facility, we went there ourselves. We found it in ruins, a remarkable feat of magic. Only a few rooms were left standing, including the main entrance hall, where some pony hath quite clearly forced her way in. We don't know pony with such power in Ponyville, aside from thyself, Twilight." "And," Hooves added, "this power is also why we find it likely you were behind the theater fire in the first place. It would have been easy for you to set it ablaze on short notice, and trap the fillies inside." Twilight shuddered, at the momentary loss for words. What was she supposed to say? "Also, alongside the piece of crucial evidence you held back, we found a book from my hoof," the Earth Pony continued, his voice growing slightly more troubled. "It is with some discomfort that I admit this book may have explained my methods a bit too detailed, which would have easily rendered one such as yourself able to commit such a villainous crime undetected." Hooves took out his monocle and began cleaning it again, clearly troubled by the thought that his work may have been used for evil. The ponies in the gallery noticed his discomfort and started talking once again. Such a good colt. It really isn't his fault. I wish my husband was a bit more like him. Twilight gritted her teeth. Was this a criminal case, or a popularity contest? I'm telling you, it was Cheerilee! She bounced the ball back at him. Yes, Cheerilee, the mare who shouldn't have even known the fortress existed, much less been able to access it, was the one who led you all there, I'm sure. Twilight replied, Hooves replied dryly, having regained full control of himself. I'm sure it was a coincidence, too, that you happened to have a book on the Nightmare Rebellion brought over to your library not a while ago, which details the location of every fortress used in the war, including the one you broke into. I don't know how she knew it was there, but she did, Twilight said decidedly. A bit stubbornly, even. So, how did she get inside? Princess Celestia destroyed all the keys, like Princess Luna said. She obviously missed one, Twilight blurted out. Luna rose up on her hind legs and slammed her hooves onto the table in front of her. Her voice filled with anger, as she completely forgot how to use the archaic language she was normally preferred during official matters. How dare you push this upon my sister? When they brought you in, you were on the very brink of death, and no doctor wanted to risk the life of another to try and save you, having heard what you did. But my sister wouldn't listen, and risked it all for you. And now, you have the cheek to question her? Luna leaned back again. You disappoint me, Twilight. You have done much for your country, but I see the burden of responsibility has finally broken your senses. No pony in the gallery dared move, and even Hooves seemed a bit shaken. Twilight felt absolutely dreadful, trying to sink away into the chair. An angry Luna was quite something, and not something you wanted to see again. That is. Yes, moving on. Sherlock Hooves finally managed, as he strode towards the table in front of the bench, and took a piece of parchment from it. This is a letter from your assistant Spike to Princess Celestia. It reads, Ruins never free. Every pony else is dead. Twilight went after Cheerilee. Send help. Translation, Twilight killed every pony. Now she's killing Cheerilee. Spike, too, was killed. Didn't like it when you found out your assistant had betrayed you, did you, Twilight? That's not how it went, Twilight said desperately. When I left Spike, he was still alive. Honest. So that means you both admit both to having been the last one to see Spike alive, and to heading out with the express intent of killing Cheerilee, Hooves said, pointedly. Yes, but only because Cheerilee would have otherwise killed me, Twilight screamed, furiously, eliciting another bout of angry mumbling from the gallery. And how do you think she would do that? The detective said, quizzically. Well, she knew all the traps and secret entrances, the unicorn began, but Hooves quickly cut her off. Oh, come on now! Not only did she know about the place, how to enter it, but she also knew where everything was? Something our Princess Luna herself cannot even remember? He scoffed. Princess Luna scraped her throat. Well, our memory of the time is very bad. But, even so, we, too, do not believe a simple earth pony from Ponyville capable of this. I'm telling you, she knew, Twilight said, as tears started to fill in the corners of her eyes. She was quickly reaching the limit of what she could take. Before she went to Ponyville, she had always been alone, and that was fine. But ever since Ponyville, she had discovered the joy of friendship and amity. She couldn't handle every pony being against her like this anymore, whimpering behind her back. I was with the princess when we responded to Spike's message, Hooves said, more quietly than before. I saw what you did to Cheerilee. I see it in my dreams. No pony should have to see that. No pony stood a chance against you. But you can't use your magic inside the fortress, Twilight said. She couldn't dispute that she had gone a bit overboard with Cheerilee, but the mare had deserved it. Twilight obviously couldn't tell the court that, though. Hooves glanced over at Princess Luna, raising a hoof questioningly. This wasn't his area of expertise. It's true that most unicorns would not be able to use their magic within the fortress, Luna said slowly, but the most powerful ones would be able to resist quite easily. Since thou hast destroyed the entire fortress by thyself, thou art clearly sufficiently powerful. But I almost died! Cheerilee stabbed me repeatedly! Twilight blurted out in desperation. That is a lie, the detective said as he stomped a hoof down on the floor. There were no wounds upon your body when we brought you in. Your gross overexertion of your magical abilities was to blame for your condition. Your lies have finally collapsed in on themselves. Murderer, Hoof said triumphantly. The crowd burst into angry conversations, and Twilight stood up upon her hind legs, shouting in order to be heard. The elements of harmony healed me! The elements are still inside the palace. Twilight shook her head. You don't need any kind of jewel or objects to harness their power. They were inside the 6 of us. Not even Tia could use them without being physically present, Luna whispered softly. And though thou art powerful, Twilight, thy art no match for our sister. We have heard enough, Twilight sparkled. I hereby find you guilty of both the Ponyville Theater fire and the yet unnamed massacre today. Thou art hereby to be executed at nightfall. We hath spoken. Sherlock Hooves stood up tall, triumphantly. After weeks of investigations and dead ends, they finally had their culprit. Shame, 7 more ponies died before they caught her, but who knows what other victims Twilight would have gone on to make had she not been discovered. Twilight fought against her chains. No, I'm innocent. You can't do this. It was Cheerilee. It was her all along. She wanted to wipe Ponyville clean from corruption. She was insane. Please, I beg you, she screamed frantically. So, that was your motive, eh? Hooves said. You're crazier than I thought, monster. Take her away. Stay away from me, Twilight shouted at the guards as they closed in on her, and she tried to bring her magic to bear against them. Her horn lit up for a split second, but then fizzled out. Huh? You've used up your magical energies, Twilight sparkled. It'll be some time before you're a threat to anyone again. Time I do not intend to give you, Luna said severely. The guards grabbed her and started to pull her away, her hind hooves dragging on the floor. No! I'm innocent! I'm innocent! Twilight screamed as she was dragged out of the courtroom, and the entire gallery cheered. There was a whole crowd waiting outside as well, although the entire column of guards had cleared the path. The masses pushed up against the guards, shouting angrily and waving their hooves in rage. Apparently, some pony had informed them of the verdict, and they weren't pleased with the purple unicorn. Twilight hung her head and let tears flow freely, unable to resist any longer. What was the point? Every pony thought she was a monster, and her name would be synonymous with the slaughter and violence all over Equestria. When they got about halfway through, a bunch of ponies started surging forward and pushing up against the guard line, attempting to break through. The armored colts stood their ground, bravely for a few seconds, but eventually they were overrun. Fights broke out between guards and civilians everywhere. Even Twilight's jailers were drawn into the fighting, and forced to let her go. She tried to get away, but the chains connecting her legs made a slow crawl at best. She didn't make it far before some pony roughly dragged her up by her chains. She looked up, and she saw a familiar, older colt standing over her. You're Rarity's dad, she said in surprise. Are you here too? The colt looked at her, tears streaming from his eyes. You killed my daughters. You took them from me! Twilight tried to tell him that he was wrong, that she was innocent, but he rammed one of his hooves into her face before she could even respond. She got smacked against the ground, and her attacker proceeded to beat her down, as she was weakly trying to shield her face with her hooves, whimpering under every blow. They trusted you! They thought you were their friend, and you killed them! Murderer! he yelled as he continued to savagely beat down upon the mare. The guards finally regained some semblance of control, pushing the enraged commoners back, bit by bit. Twilight's jailers finally broke free from their own opponents as well, and they pulled Rarity's dad off of the unicorn, who was shaking on the ground. They handed the colt more gently than perhaps they needed to. They'd probably have done the same thing if he did it. Same thing he did if their job wasn't on the line. They started moving again, and she whimpered as her battered and bruised body was roughly dragged along the ground. The crowd changed tactics, throwing everything they could find at the guards, hoping to get a shot in on Twilight. The guards stoically relied on their armor and shields for protection, but Twilight had no such thing going for her. She was a small target, but occasionally a neatly lobbed rock still fell down upon her, adding to her already considerable repertoire of bruises. At long last, they reached the other side of the plaza, and walked right into the jail, a decrepit building which hardly ever saw any use. The first cell they entered was empty, so they simply threw Twilight in there, followed by a piece of bread as hard as a brick, and a bowl of water, both aimed at her face. She clenched her hooves against her brow as the bowl bounced off, spilling its contents all over the floor of the cell. She curled up in a ball and cried, wondering where it had all gone wrong.